Come along, children. Now we're going to have a little music.
What is up, y'all? We are back on First Cut to review the newest HBO Max release coming from DC Comics and Warner Brothers and Patty Jenkins, and that is Wonder Woman 1984. I am joined by Sabrina, and we are gonna do a non-spoiler review for this review. So if you're coming in looking for spoilers, that review will come later on down the line, but this is strictly non-spoiler. So Sabrina, first off, I know you're a big Wonder Woman fan. I know you're just a big fan of, superhero movies in general, comic book movies in general. What were your initial thoughts seeing this follow-up to the original Wonder Woman?
Yeah, so, we watched it a few weeks ago and it's we've gotten time to sit on it. I feel like that's always really important with these big films because, of course, we're seeing something exciting. We're seeing something that we like. So our initial thoughts might not ultimately line up with how we feel. So I'm really glad that we've gotten to sit on it for a bit. And so initially coming out of this film, I had a lot of fun. That's something I will say. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a great follow-up. I loved Diana Prince's story, and I loved how much we evolved this character from the first time period that we saw her in the previous film to this one, and how it kind of leads her to how we ultimately see her in Batman versus Superman and in Justice League. I think they do a great job with her character. I think that's number one. And honestly, that's the most important thing that they could do with this type of film. The subsequent characters, there's a lot of pros and cons, which we'll definitely be getting into. Ultimately, I thought it was pretty messy, but a good time. Hesitant to kind of say whether or not it's better than the first or if I'm even comparing it to the first. I do think it's like top tier DC though. What we've seen from like the DCEU. Not that there's that much competition really, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it myself as well. I enjoyed the first Wonder Woman when it came out in 2017, and part of why I liked it is because I felt like it took the World War One aesthetic, which we don't really see in like a lot of movies. There's not just a lot of World War One movies in general. So I kind of took that and ran with it, and I thought a really dynamic way, even towards the end of it having a not really clear ambiguous villain. Until it did have the big villain, the big CGI villain, which I thought it fell apart in. But everything leading up to that I thought was fascinating because the whole idea of like World War One is like, it's not like a singular thing that caused it. It was like a lot of things. And I thought that was hammered in well in Wonder Woman, especially with the idea of humans just naturally being humans, and then you see the good of humanity and people, and you see the bad in humanity and people too. So I really enjoyed that about the first one. I think for the second one, when they first announced it and they said it was set in the 80s, I kind of anticipated it wouldn't go as deep for me in terms of like that kind of thinking. But obviously we've seen stuff set in the 80s, and you can have a lot of fun with that too. I'm not a big 80s nostalgia fan. Like I'm just not. I kind of think it's cheesy. I don't know why people are stuck in that time period. I don't get it. All of those aspects of the film I didn't like. I thought it was just a little too cheesy, like a little too over the top. Now everything with Wonder Woman and with all the plots, all the subplots and all that kind of stuff was dope, but I just thought the whole 80s overly aesthetic like kind of thing, it really didn't move the needle for me. Like if this was set in the 90s or the 2000s or a current present day, like I even think if it was set in present day it might have actually even worked better, but I don't know. So so that's the only thing for me was like I didn't like the 80s. I didn't like the aesthetic of it, but everything else, like I thought the action was actually bigger this time around than it was in the first one. I thought that was really cool. It's a shame that we didn't get to see it on the big screen because this was just a huge epic spectacle that was really, really awesome. And yeah, I dug it, but I definitely felt it was a little cheesy for my taste.
That was the thing. That's kind of where I said it was messy. I feel like, okay, we have a great opening sequence. I think obviously it brings us back to the first film. It's something that we want to see. They did such a great job with that. I like that they give us a little taste of it. But then after that, I agree with you with this entire 80s thing that we see with Stranger Things and stuff like that. Sometimes it can work really well and it doesn't take me out of a film or a show. but sometimes it does. And the sequence that we get that we've seen clips of, and it's in the trailer and things like that, but like the mall sequence, I just thought it was a little interesting how they did that, because it started off tonally to be a little bit more silly, definitely like 80s comic book type of feel. And so I didn't know if that was going to be the tone for the entire film. And because they went from that and then it kind of shifts in a different way, and it still stays a little bit light, but not as silly and playful. So I just thought that was weird. That entire sequence, it was like friendly neighborhood Wonder Woman type of thing. And I don't know if I necessarily vibed with that right away. But once we got past that and we really get introduced to the characters, of course, we get introduced to Pedro Pascal and Kristen Wiig's characters. That's kind of that ending of the first act, that middle and ending of the first act, when they're setting all this up, when they're building these rich characters. I really enjoyed that. I actually thought that first act was pretty solid after the messiness that we got in the beginning. And as we went on, I just feel like it started to lose itself just a little bit. I think we had so much going on. It is a long film, but I feel like some of the things that were important to be fleshed out and to really dive into, they kind of didn't do a great job of it. Kristen Wiig, I just want to give a shout out really quick, because I was really happy to see her in a role like this. I think she's an incredible actress. Of course, coming off of SNL and having to play so many different characters every single week, you know she has the ability to like transform into a role. And of course, we know she's Cheetah. So I really liked how they took her from Barbara to her transition into Cheetah. She had a full body performance from that. It wasn't just something like, oh, she loses the glasses and fixes her hair a little bit different, puts on more makeup, and now she's like all confident and things like that. We get an entire body sense of her confidence, like the way she carries herself and her walk and her stance is different. So I just want to give a huge shout out to that. I thought she was really great. And I thought ultimately at the end, they just didn't do enough for her character. I think her dynamic with Diana throughout the film was really cool. But like, I feel like that final sequence that we see her in, not to get into anything, but that final sequence just didn't really work well for me. And that's not anything on Kristen Wiig. That's just from a filmmaking standpoint. And also that final like battle sequence, it's like takes place in the dark. How do you feel about the CGI? I'm just curious. How do you feel about the CGI of Cheetah?
Well, it's funny because when the trailer first came out, I thought it looked terrible. Like I was like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be unwatchable. I don't know what this is gonna be. And then after, but you know, when I actually saw the movie, I thought I was going off the trailer, so I thought it looked terrible from the trailer. In the final movie, it looked better than the trailer did. So, but I don't know. What did you think of the CGI?
Well, I was like, okay, it's taking place at like towards the nighttime in the dark. All right, they're probably trying to hide this just a little bit. I loved everything about it, and we've already seen this, so I could talk about it. I loved everything except for the hair. I understand like she has hair in the comic books and you want to stick to that. But you know, sometimes, and obviously we've kind of talked about this with other films, sometimes you will have to change aspects for it to just look a little bit better. Yeah. And I feel like if they had done the hair in a different way, it was kind of this like scraggly Gollum type of hair. And I was like, ooh, maybe give her no hair and just have it be full like Cheetah look, or have her have like a little bit more luscious of locks. I just thought the whole like Gollum aspect of it kind of took me out for a second. It was better than it looked in the trailer, though. I will say that. I do agree with you there.
I got to go back because maybe I wasn't paying enough attention to the CGI.
Because it takes place in the dark.
Yeah.
They did that for a reason. 100%. It makes sense. So like I liked it. I think a lot of it looked great, but just that hair really bothered me. I don't know why. And the movement of Cheetah throughout that scene in particular towards the end, I thought it was cool. I thought the fight choreography through a lot of these sequences was really interesting. I liked how they panned out a lot of those, but that, unfortunately, she was one of the strongest aspects for like the first half of the film. And then it just kind of fell apart. I just thought we lost a little bit of what was interesting with their dynamic and things like that. I want to kind of move on to like Maxwell Lord, Pedro Pascal's character. I wonder how you feel about that.
Well, that was the part of the movie that felt the most like 80s-ish, you know what I mean? And that's why I was like, I kind of checked out because for one, I really didn't understand his motivation. You know, not to get into spoiler territory, but he has like he he has a very like strange like idea of like how to make his business grow. And I don't know. I don't know if he's just like consumed by power. So I don't know where his thing goes, but then it leads to it just leads to a lot of events and that I'm just confused about. Like I don't know what you know, I don't know what his ultimate goal is. What's his end game here? Now that for me, I felt like that was the weakness as opposed to with Cheetah, like you said, I felt like that was more in the vein of like Batman Returns, where you get the stuff with like the Catwoman transformation, except you see with Cheetah, it happens throughout the entire movie. You see that through the first half of Batman Returns, but I feel like through Cheetah, you see that transformation happen through the whole movie, and it's fascinating. But I feel like when it got to Maxwell Lord, it was like, to me, those are the times I just was ready to check out. And no offense to Pedro Pascal, he does his best, you know, playing that character, and he's fun and he's dynamic. But I felt the same way for him that I felt about Ewan McGregor's character in Birds of Prey, which is just nothing. Yeah, just nothing for me.
That's interesting. No, I love to hear that perspective because I actually felt the opposite.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah, I actually liked a lot of what he had to offer in this film because when we originally see him, not to say too much, but obviously he's not in the best place. I loved the interesting.
I like that part of it. I definitely like the beginning parts of his storyline for sure.
And we have a moment that I won't spoil necessarily. I think we'll definitely get into it when we talk about spoilers, but we have a moment where he's interacting with his child and you see the facade go away of this like TV personality, businessman type of deal, which yes, it is pretty similar to something like Trump. But we see that facade go away. And then we see who he truly is for a minute, and he's allowing himself to be vulnerable. So that's all credit to like Pedro Pascal, really. His performance is what kind of dives that in a much deeper than I thought it would be. And obviously to the writing, because they put that in. But once he like drops the facade for a second, that's kind of where it clicked to me. And I was like, oh, this is where we're going with the story. But then I agree with you where as we go further, we're just kind of losing it. It's really unfortunate because like I said, at the end of the first half of the second act, I found it to be really interesting. But then, yeah, it's that power, that motivation. That's kind of where I was like, where is he going to stop? Like, and everything that was happening, but Pedro's performance, like incredible as his his health is declining, as he's gaining power. Just through all of that, it felt really, really believable. So I loved that. But I do agree with you. Once we kind of got to like the second half of the film, it just got a little bit confusing for me. I just didn't know necessarily where we were going with all of this and where his ultimate end goal was. But I do think it was more of just like power and how it changes everybody, because we see him so hungry for power. And that's kind of where that 80s aspect comes in, because it's something that we still see nowadays, of course, but especially back in this time, that if you are a certain way and you are brought up a certain way, you know, sometimes you have to hide elements of that to climb up to the top. So I do like that entire aspect, having his child in the film. So these core characters that we kind of focus on within the film, I liked a little bit, some I didn't like. And I think it's up to everybody's interpretation and everything's subjective with this. So Cheetah might hit harder for other people. I wanted to see a little bit more at the end because she was the only person that can really match Diana in terms of power. And I just don't feel like that was kind of hit home towards the end. I thought we were going to maybe see more and maybe be teased something. Also, really quick, there was a post-credit scene that we didn't see with our screeners because we got the first round of screeners. Yeah, we didn't see it. So I don't know what it is. When we talk about the spoiler review, it'll definitely be something that we bring up, but we didn't get to see that, unfortunately. So we don't know anything that happens there yet. But I thought another thing is I really loved kind of how they brought in Chris Pine, obviously Steve Trevor. Of course, we know it from all the trailers. He's back. I liked what they did. It worked for me. Did it work for you?
Yeah, I thought it was cool. Yeah, I thought it was interesting. You know, part of me gets uncertain when there's a character in the first of a movie that dies and then, you know, makes a return somehow magically in the second one. And I definitely felt like they didn't do anything to mediate that concern. I really enjoyed their relationship and their chemistry because it really worked in the first one, and I think it's a winning dynamic in the second one. I mean, that being said, do I still think it's not like the best storytelling device to bring back a dead character? Of course not, but it's cool. You know, it's cool for this movie.
When they brought him back, I thought besides like the 80s cheesiness, which I know you're saying you don't love that 80s cheese. So like the whole montage of him trying on different clothes and things like that. I'm like, all right, there's so much happening. Can you just get on with the story? I know it's sweet and I know it's wholesome, but like there's just so much happening and they're straight up chilling, trying on 20 different things. I'm like, it doesn't really matter what you wear at this point. And I like that she's introducing him to the world at this time. This is something obviously he hasn't experienced anything like this. And it's a nice callback to the first film. It's a nice callback to see her kind of showing him the ropes and showing him the way the world works right now. Something that I think is really interesting is that like theme of like sacrifice and success and how like not doing stuff for your own personal gain, that everything does come with consequences. So just at the snap of the fingers, you can't just change anything about your life without having something change in a negative way in a different aspect. And I think that's something important to all three of these characters. And it humanizes like Diana's journey. It really brings her down onto a level and it brings a very, very great emotional scene. I think it was probably the strongest scene Gal Gadot's acted in Wonder Woman. And I feel like she really came to with this character in that emotional sequence that we get. So I thought he provided a lot within the story, but yeah, it's one of those things where it makes sense. I understand how they went that way. And something you alluded to that's definitely going to be cut out when this is posted. We get a lot of nods to a lot of comic book stuff that people, of course, always want to see on screen. And that sequence in particular, imagine seeing that one in a theater. Like imagine with the sound design and score and just the visuals, I think it would have looked great.
Yeah, and speaking of the score, Hans Zimmer's score for this movie was absolutely top notch. I for one, I didn't even know he was composing this movie. That was a bit of a surprise. And then you get a little bit of the classic Wonder Woman theme that came in Batman v Superman. I thought that was a little surprising. And then you also get like new renditions of themes, and you get a little 80s in there. The one thing that was notable, and Destiny pointed this out to me actually, was that they didn't even use any like 80s like music, like any kind of like 80s pop songs, like really that much in the film. Like I think they might have in like maybe one or two parts, but like they went largely without the 80s, which for a movie that's like so like 80s, it went largely with just original score, which I'm down for. I like the Hans Zimmer score for this. And on top of that, I thought the costume design was dope too. Like I thought Diana's like ghost suit that you see her like wearing in the trailer was amazing. I also think just whenever she's just wearing like normal clothes, like she just looks awesome. Like I feel like she rocks like that blue onesie, or I don't know if it's a onesie, but like she's wearing like a blue like swing piece like through a lot of it. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I feel like even though it's like her clothing is like a weird blend of like 80s and modern, where you can see somebody wearing that today and also somebody wearing that in the 80s, whereas everybody else, that's where I liked it. But then also it was like, man, then why did he go so crazy on like all the other costumes? Because everything else is just like colorful, poppy 80s, whatever. But nonetheless, I really thought the costume design, the visual effects, and the cinematography, like you said, like certain sequences are just made to be seen on the big screen. I thought they really achieved that really, really well.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned like Diana's clothing, because that's something that I've definitely noticed throughout all the films. Even when we see her in Batman versus Superman and in Justice League, when she's Diana, she's always very polished. And even like the looks that she has within this film when she's Diana, definitely we could see her wearing something like that. She has her gowns, just like you mentioned, she has her very polished suits when she's going to work. She carries herself in a specific way that obviously we see somebody like Kristen Wiig's Cheetah look at, where it's like, this person is just different. Like she's just walking at events or walking down the street and people are stopping and turning and noticing her because she just has something special to her, something unique. And I like how that's kind of shown. And yeah, even because imagine seeing her in like a full 80s outfit, like a full 80s workout outfit. Like it just would not make sense for the character. So I think they did a really great job staying with that classy, polished look that she has throughout the film. Yeah, I just overall, there was a lot of things that I really, really loved. And I thought were super solid, super strong. There's just a few moments where I'm like, okay, I would like to see this flesh out a little bit more, maybe a little less of this. A few moments where I'm like, okay, we're kind of losing steam over here. But I think it ultimately just like wrapped up in a really beautiful way. I think the message is something that is impactful and is important. And it's not something that just like absolutely nails you over the head 20,000 times. It's just something, it provides like an emotion to you. And I think that's what's important with a story like this, is that it's supposed to hit you in a certain way. And you don't even feel like you're absorbing kind of all of that information, but it's just happening. And it's not something that takes you out of the film to do so. So I love that they did that. I think it dropping on HBO Max makes sense with the current state that we're in the country. Obviously, I would have loved to see it in a theater. Seeing it at home is not going to be quite the same experience, but I'm excited to check it out again. And I feel like this is a really fun, family-friendly film to watch. And I'm just excited to see a powerful, badass woman just be incredible. Like I'm just happy anytime I get to see this. It's very clear that Patty Jenkins has a hold on this character with all the nods we get, with the moments that we get, such specific things where you can see like there's a reason Patty Jenkins is behind these films. You really couldn't have a lot of filmmakers do it the same way. I liked the incorporation of Cheetah. I hope we get to see maybe I'm not like spoiler, but like I hope we get to see more interesting dynamics like that. That's something that I want to see going forward with Wonder Woman. If a Wonder Woman 3 comes out, it has to. We have to see more of Diana Prince. But yeah, any final thoughts?
No, I mean, I think you wrapped it up perfectly. Yeah, I dig I dig seeing powerful women on screen kicking butt. And Diana's no different. It's definitely a great Wonder Woman movie if you're a Wonder Woman fan. There's actually a lot of nods to the TV show too, to the 70s and I guess early 80s TV show. So I guess probably that's where they probably got the idea of like putting it in the 80s. But there's nods to that. There's nods to, like I said, the Wonder Woman character. And Cheetah's one of those all time like Wonder Woman villains. We see her in like a lot of animated stuff and all that kind of stuff. So it's good to see that rendition come on the big screen in a fateful, which I feel like in a fateful and a just way. And I'm looking forward to see more Wonder Woman, just like you said. And again, all power to Patty Jenkins, because I think if this was handled, and again, this was we see it literally in something like a Batman v Superman or a Justice League, when it's handled in the hands of a male director, she gets overly sexualized and overly like glamorized and like these weird like fetishizing ways. But in this one, at the very, or at least in my opinion, when I watch Wonder Woman and Wonder Woman 1984, I don't get any of that. I get a very wholesome, powerful character who is just like on even playing field with, Superman and Shazam and all that too. So, and I definitely, if I was to rate this in the cheesy DC chain, when I look at Aquaman and Shazam, because I would put I wouldn't even put the first Wonder Woman in that one, because I think the first Wonder Woman is not that cheesy, but I feel like this one's definitely in the Shazam, and I would probably put Aquaman as easily the cheesiest, and then I'll put this one, and then I'll put Shazam only because Shazam is cheesy, but at least I don't know. Maybe Shazam, they're kind of equal to me. So I don't know. Maybe I gotta think about that.
Equal. I understand what you mean with that. In terms of cheesiness, I feel like like I mentioned kind of earlier, there was those few moments where I was like, ooh, this is a little too cheesy. And then everything else we get, I'm like, all right, it makes sense. We do get a lot of payoff with a lot of those moments. And it's not just cheesy and fun and light and silly just to be so, because that doesn't really fit the character that well. Like I said, during that one sequence, like at the mall, I was like, I don't know what this is. I did not love that at all. But once we got the engine going, it made sense throughout the film. So I like that you did mention that. And I honestly, it's really hard. I know we rated DC on a live stream, the DCEU. It's really tough. I would honestly say this is still like top tier. I like the first and second Wonder Woman actually pretty equally. Even like the things I pick apart, I'm still happy to see a lot of this on screen in general. And I think ultimately this third act was worlds better than the third act from the first film. So it was tighter.
I'll say that. For me, I personally don't think I like it as much as the first one. They're really close. But I definitely say I like the third act, and I really like Cheetah as a villain way more than old dude in the first one. So I like, it's easily way better. And I think if people were looking at that complaint in the first one, that issue definitely got mended in the second one for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And, so yeah, I would recommend everybody to check this out and kind of come to their own consensus. In the comments, let us know what you thought. Be civil to each other. I don't know what happens when these kind of films come out. People are just absolutely atrocious to each other, fighting about stuff. Everything's subjective. People are going to love certain things and maybe not love other parts of it, but just stay civil, guys.
Yeah. It's, and stay civil. And also it's Christmas. Like, hey, don't be getting heated over a comic book movie during Christmas time, y'all. It's not worth it. So yeah, and be sure, but yeah, today's Christmas Eve. Tomorrow is Christmas Day. Be sure to watch Wonder Woman 1984 on HBO Max if you're interested. And then come back to First Cut, because we will be doing a spoiler-filled review of Wonder Woman 1984 coming out very, 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 very soon. Otherwise, Sabrina, where can people follow you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at SabrinaXMonica, and then also on Twitter at SabrinaOnFilm. The First Cut accounts on Twitter and Instagram at FirstCutTMO. Make sure you guys obviously drop a like, subscribe if you enjoyed. We have so much more coming.
Yeah, like Sabrina said, please hit that like button. It helps us in the algorithm. And we got this review out early for the First Cut fans. So share it around and let people know who the smartest brains in the movie YouTube space are. You can follow me at Director RB3 on Twitter and Instagram. And for First Cut, I'm RB3.
I'm Sabrina.
And we are peacing out. Peace out, y'all.
Only one can remain.